Samson, a vibrant green-winged macaw, perched silently beside his beloved owner, Mr. Thompson. Mr. Thompson lay still, his eyes closed in eternal slumber. Samson had sensed a change in his human companion, a stillness he couldn't comprehend. He nuzzled his bright red, blue and green feathers against Mr. Thompson's hand, chirping softly. There was no response, only the cold silence that had enveloped the room. Samson refused to leave Mr. Thompson's side for 3 long days. He remained perched on the old man's armchair, his bright eyes growing dimmer with each passing hour. He ate nothing, his once vibrant plumage losing its luster. He called out for Mr. Thompson in the night, his cries echoing through the empty house, but only silence answered back. Finally, a kind neighbour, Mrs. Peterson, discovered Mr. Thompson and the heartbroken Samson. She coaxed Samson down from his perch with gentle words and a bowl of fresh fruit. Samson, weak and disoriented, allowed Mrs. Peterson to take him into her care. He missed Mr. Thompson terribly, his heart heavy with grief. He yearned for the familiar scratch behind his head, the sound of Mr. Thompson's voice, the warmth of his presence. But Mr. Thompson was gone, and Samson was alone. Mrs. Peterson, though well-intentioned, couldn't keep Samson. Her small apartment and busy schedule weren't suitable for a large, intelligent parrot like him. So, Samson's journey took him from one temporary home to another. After a stay at the Parrot Hope Rescue, he was fostered and then adopted to a nice couple. But after they decided to divorce, no longer wanting Samson. Each of these moves brought a fresh wave of anxiety for Samson. He missed the consistency of a loving home, the comfort of a familiar routine. He longed for someone who understood his language, his moods, his need for interaction. He felt like a piece of furniture, moved from place to place, never truly belonging. The stress began to manifest physically. Samson, once a vibrant and playful parrot, grew quiet and withdrawn. He started plucking at his feathers, leaving bald patches on his once magnificent wings. His once sharp mind, starved for stimulation, dulled with each passing day. He was a shadow of his former self, lost in a world that no longer made sense. Samson's final stop was being back to Parrot Hope Rescue. It was a cacophony of sounds and smells, a far cry from the quiet comfort of Mr. Thompson's home. He spent his days listening to other parrots scream and squawk incessantly. Samson, overwhelmed and frightened, retreated to the farthest corner of his cage, his heart pounding in his chest. He watched as other parrots were adopted, their eyes shining with hope. But no one seemed to notice Samson, huddled in his cage, his once spectacular feathers dull and sparse. He was losing hope, his spirit dwindling with each passing day. The shelter staff did their best to care for Samson, but they were stretched thin. They had dozens of parrots to look after, each with their own unique needs. Samson, lost in his grief and fear, became just another bird in a cage, his vibrant personality dimmed by neglect and despair. Eventually, he was once again moved to a foster home while he awaited someone to want to open their hearts and home on a permanent basis. One sunny afternoon, Sal and Debbie Patera walked into the parrot shelter. They were a lively couple, Mr. and Mrs. Patera. They were looking for a companion, a parrot to share their home and their hearts with after the death of their former parrot, Moscato. Sal and Debbie, who are animal lovers through and through, were immediately drawn to Samson. They saw past his tattered feathers, his withdrawn demeanor, and sensed the gentle soul that resided within. Sal approached his perch slowly, speaking in soft, soothing tones. Samson, wary at first, slowly turned his head towards Sal, but was apprehensive, biting his arm. But Sal's gentle touch and the warmth in his eyes sparked a flicker of hope in Samson's heart. After a few moments, he started talking to Sal, letting him know he was a good bird. Sal smiled, his heart melting at the sound. "He's perfect," he whispered to Debbie, and in that moment, a bond was forged. The Patera family welcomed Samson into their home with open arms. They showered him with love, attention, and a healthy diet of fresh fruits, vegetables, and nuts. Sal and Debbie spent hours interacting with Samson, talking to him, teaching him tricks, and simply enjoying his company. Slowly but surely, Samson began to heal. His feathers grew back, vibrant and beautiful. He rediscovered his voice, filling the Patera household with his chatter and happy squawks. He learned to trust again, to love again. He was no longer the scared, lonely bird who had arrived at the shelter. He was Samson, a cherished member of the Pitera family. One warm spring day, Sal and Debbie decided to take Samson outside. He hesitated at first, unsure of this vast, unfamiliar world. But with the Pitera's encouragement, he spread his wings and took flight. He soared through the air, feeling the wind beneath his wings, the sun on his face. He felt free, alive and utterly joyful. From that day on, Samson's flights became a regular occurrence. He would swoop and dive, his laughter echoing through the neighborhood. But no matter how far he flew, he always returned to Sal's outstretched arm, to the warmth and love of his forever home. He had found his flock, his place in the world, and his heart, once broken, soared with happiness.